So George is working with Deets, and Deets has been not really wanting to come in for human contact. Like, he'll come in, there's no question, if he's with Pooh or Siri or Bella, but the energy for him in terms of human is sort of like, I don't know. So we're just gonna observe. Like, Deets is actually holding his space for a while, which is amazing because he usually is the first one, like, he flights off. So just kind of notice what you notice in Deets and how he's sort of adjusting his head. George isn't putting any pressure on him at all, but they are in a field together of quantum entanglement, and that's the molecules. That's beautiful that Deets is even turning to look in George's direction. The molecules play with each other. So notice what happens in Deets, in what he actually is trying to work through within himself. When George gives him space, when George starts to move in, notice what takes place subtly with Deets. Notice what starts to take place in his head. Notice what is happening, of how he's trying to work through where he's uncomfortable. First, he starts to pull away, okay? Then George backs off. So this is the chi dancing. You know, it's chi, it's following the Wu way of horses. You'll start to notice subtle little shifts in how Deets is moving his head. And what he's trying to do, he's holding his space, which is beautiful. He's trying to work through, how do I find a safe space within myself with human? And I asked him if he wanted body work, and he said nope, he wants to work it through himself. So just as George goes in, watch how Deets kind of moves his head to start to find a place where he can feel safe, that even if he does have some misalignment, George is giving him the space to work it through, even when he's close to him. He's not going to put undue pressure on him. And sometimes people find this a much slower type of process rather than pushing the horse. But watch how his head's starting to move out right now, right? He's stuck a little bit somewhere in his neck. I'm not 100% sure because I didn't work on him yet. But watch how subtly he's trying to figure out, okay, even with this thing going on in my neck, can I hold it? That little head flick wasn't necessarily like, hey, George, you're too close, because Deets isn't moving away and his ears are fine. It's just like, okay, I'm feeling a little pressure inside my body, Deets' body. Can I hold this? And he just kind of dropped his head a little bit, and he's like, all right, I'm finding a way through it. But there's no undue pressure. What George is saying is, can you handle this? Can you handle this? Okay? And that's one way that we found that you can work with Mustangs from a very gentle place. You don't have to break them. You don't have to break their spirits, and you don't have to force them. You can get into conversation and you can ask them. Because I know that if I was dancing with a partner, I'd much rather have a willing partner that wants to dance with me. Now that's beautiful. That's rare for Deets to ever come in and touch. And it was his choice. George isn't reaching out to touch him. He's just asking, is it okay if I'm in your space? Is it okay if I'm in your space? And then he's letting Deets process. Now he's licking and chewing. Okay. And there's licking and chewing that is stress, but there's also licking and chewing that's releasing stress. And Deets is releasing a level of stress. Okay. And George, as a great dance partner, when he recognizes that it's too much for the horse, he just backs up. That's it. But George isn't trying to force energy or himself into the horse's space. He's just continually dancing. Are we okay in this step? Are we okay at this step? How are we doing? And he's kindly checking in with his partner. But also notice George's energy. George is very consistent. He's really calm. He's really clear. That sets up a safety bubble for the horse in terms of the energetic. The horse doesn't feel like he's got to evade him. And I'd much rather go slower and make this kind of connection with a horse to really know the intimacy, you know, where's that horse's trigger? Right now, he's working something out in his jaw because he's probably a little tight somewhere in his neck. And by honoring where the horse is, George lets him feel what he needs to feel, then he can always back off. But the horse doesn't ever have to feel like, oh, I have to do this or I'm going to get punished. The horse actually gets to feel like, okay, actually, I might want to dance with this person because they feel really respectful of me. They feel safe. It's very different working with a willing partner than an unwilling partner. Right, girl? I notice you're paying attention in here too. Okay, but that's also a really cool thing too about quantum entanglements. Ceres right next to Deets. Most people, you know, opt out of, I want the horse, I want to single out the horse. Well, you've already got Bailey's back there behind George. You got Deets right here. You got Siri right here. So now Deets says, oh, okay, well, I'll touch, and that was enough. But what's starting to happen is he's growing his own confidence in himself, that he's safe, and in George, that he's safe around George. And notice too, George never tells the horse what to do. He's always asking or inviting. This is the ask, is that okay? Stepping out, okay, I'm going to give you an invitation if you want to step into my space. Okay, and there's a plastic bag which is flying around, which can sometimes set horses off. But even look at how Deets is handling it. He's curious, but he's not like freaking out. Now, I don't think Deets has ever worked with a flag, has he? Or a baggie? So this is, I mean, and Deets is probably one of our more flighty guys, right? But look what happens, like in natural settings without having to flag down a horse. Look at what's happening. Bailey's is getting used to it. She's never seen a plastic bag before, and she's a formerly wild Mustang. Deets has never seen a plastic bag before, formerly wild Mustang. Siri's not freaking out, formerly wild Mustang. These are all range Mustangs. Up, and here comes the bag near Deets, and okay, something happened, no big deal. Siri might go to check it out. Or eat the tumbleweed. Check that out before she eats, or before she checks out the bag. But notice what's happening here. Most people will go with training. It's got to be a single animal. You're putting them in a round pen. You're chasing them around. There's no need to chase them around. Connect with them.
And I love having a horse that was in a similar position to the horse that I'm working with. Bailey's is very similar when she came here, where Deets is. Sensitive.
Yep.
And just not trusting of humans.
Right. And you're not forcing Deets' feet to move in order to get him to trust you or exhaust him to relax his brain. You're actually respecting the language of the horse and of the Mustang by working in the chi field with him the same way the horses would work with each other. Beautiful. That's gorgeous. And this way, preparing this horse for when he's ready for training, if he decides he wants to be in training or ridden. You're preparing him by having a really good, solid, trustworthy relationship. And he's licking and chewing. And he's making the decision to actually move towards George. This is how George always makes himself catchable to horses. Deets will, after this session, I guarantee you, he's going to start coming to look for George more often. Because now that he's starting to trust, he's going to seek George out, so George doesn't ever even have to go out with a lead rope to catch this horse. The horse will start coming to him. And how much better is it when the horse can make the decision to come to you? Everything in the brain, everything in the nervous system, just makes everything so much easier. And if and when Deets is ready to go for training, his training's going to be so much easier. Because he's going to be a willing partner. And notice the asks. Is this okay? Are you okay here? And you see those little shots in Deets' face, which is fine. He's going to try to work out whatever's stuck behind probably his right jaw and maybe the right side of maybe his occiput and maybe a couple cervical vertebrae. But if he is stuck and you go to push him, it's going to make it worse on the horse and worse on the human. George is only asking for space. It's allowing Deets to work out whatever he needs to work out in his body. And that plastic bag is still in the corner bouncing around, so nobody's really freaked out by it. And we don't have to chase anybody with flags or bags on poles. Okay, and there goes Deets saying, hey George, is it okay if I come in your space? Mutual respect at its most beautiful. Really. And this is why at Eagles and Wild Horses Ranch and through Evanescent Mustang Rescue, we work with these horses in a different way than most. And we find, especially George finds, it's the easiest way to work with horses. It's the easiest way to help horses regain themselves and be sound again. We do not have to be chasing them to make connection. And the whole notion about having to move their feet so they respect you, well, you know, this kind of shoots that theory right in the foot. Or the boot. Or the arse.
I'll take...
I need you to talk louder because it's gonna. I don't know if the mic will pick it up.
I'll take 2 steps towards me that are an invitation over 200 steps running in a circle.
Yes. 2 steps. It's much. That's the other thing about Wu Wei and using Qigong with horses. It's very, very energy efficient. No one is getting chased here to make a connection. And the other piece too is it's pleasant. It's pleasant for the human and it's pleasant for the horse. And I don't want a horse personally that is going to listen to everything I say but doesn't think. Because if I've taken away that horse's natural instinct to think for itself, then I'm stripping that horse of some of its naturalness. And I will not ever do that. And now he's relaxed enough to take a poop. Okay, so he's releasing. He's calm. George is close to him. No big deal. The other horses are calm. You can see Rango. Is that... I want to say it's Rango and Shirley just hanging out. Bailey's just took a poop. Siri's really relaxed. I'm not really exactly sure where that whole theory comes from of you must train a horse by itself and isolate it. I was just over training the babies and they're both together, and I did halter work and feet work, and it's just natural. And then if Deets feels like, okay, I got enough, George will just walk away from the session. Nobody's exhausted. Deets is drinking. He's relaxed. George is relaxed. All the other horses are relaxed.
Poop is
Poop
relaxed.
is relaxed. She pooped. This horse does not stand this close to me ever. Like, ever. And she's kind of hanging out with, like, okay, all right, I could get with the program. And he's drinking.
More.
Yep.
So he's hydrating his body.
Yep.
Which is going to help everything. Farting.
Yep.
Dropped his junk.
Yep.
All of those are signs of horses comfortably working through things.
Right. No, and you didn't have to ever move his feet whatsoever.
Yep. And he'll probably come over here on the mineral block.
So, yeah. And, I mean, how many horses, how many Mustangs, behaviorally challenged Mustangs that came from kill pens, have you? Pretty much all of them.
Pretty much.
Pretty much. And it's the same way. Everybody's goes through chi training. And it's funny because the horses are the ones that taught us, you know, how do you do this in a way that is safe, that does not have to stress out the horse. Now, we're not talking like we haven't saddled these horses, but if you prepare them this way before you even saddle them, makes the most amount of sense, because when you saddle them, it's not going to be a big deal. You've already built up that trust. And you become aware of where they're out of balance before you even get on them. Pretty cool. Thank you for sharing that with us.
Thank you, Siri.
Good girl, Mama. And there goes that plastic bag, and Bailey's is not freaking out about it. She's just following it, as are the other horses. So when you're calm around your horses can be calm with everything else. And these are formerly wild animals. I mean, it's better to synchronize in their energy field, in my opinion, than to try to get them or force them to synchronize with ours. So it's important that we learn about the Wu Wei of wild Mustangs. And the coolest part, the results actually speak for themselves. That's the coolest part.